When my wife passed away and my daughter inherited $120 million, my unemployed son-in-law punched me and shouted, "Now that we're rich, get out of our lives, old man." I didn't react. I just called my lawyer, and the truth about the inheritance came out. I'm glad to have you here. Follow my story until the end and comment the city you're watching from so I can see how far my story has reached. I never thought the worst day of my life would get even worse. Standing there in my black suit, still numb from lowering Jessica's casket into the ground just hours before, I watched my son-in-law Frank count money at my kitchen table like he was already the king of the castle. "Dad, we need to talk," Olivia said, but her voice sounded different, colder. She stood behind Frank with her arms crossed, and for a moment, I didn't recognize my own daughter. I was still holding Jessica's reading glasses in my pocket. She'd left them on her nightstand the morning she passed, and I couldn't bring myself to put them away. The funeral director had asked if we wanted anything buried with her, but these felt too personal, too much like the Jessica who would wake up early just to read me news articles over coffee. "Sure, sweetheart. What's on your mind?" I said, settling into the chair where Jessica used to sit for breakfast. Everything in this house still smelled like her perfume. Frank looked up from the papers scattered across the table. Bank statements, investment portfolios, insurance documents. He'd been going through Jessica's files like a vulture picking at bones. "We know about the money, John," Frank said, not even looking at me. "The $120 million. Jessica's inheritance from her father's oil investments." I blinked. Jessica had never talked much about her father's business dealings. He'd died when she was young, and she always said the family money came with too many strings attached. She preferred living simply, working as a school counselor, driving the same Honda for 15 years. "I'm not sure what you're talking about," I said honestly. Frank's laugh was sharp and ugly. "Don't play dumb, old man. The lawyer's already called. Olivia inherits everything now that Jessica's gone." I looked at my daughter, searching her face for the little girl who used to crawl into our bed during thunderstorms. "Olivia, what's this about?" She shifted uncomfortably but didn't soften. "Mom left me everything, Dad. The house, the investments, all of it. We think it's best if you find your own place." The words hit me like ice water. Find my own place? This is our home, Olivia. Your mother and I built this life together for 37 years. Frank stood up, his chair scraping against the hardwood floor Jessica had insisted we install when Olivia was in high school. "Look, John, I'll be straight with you. Olivia and I have plans. Big plans. We're thinking of renovating this place, maybe selling it and buying something more suitable for our new situation." "New situation?" I repeated. "We're rich now," Frank said, spreading his arms wide. "Really rich, and frankly, having you hanging around, acting all sad and pathetic, doesn't fit the image we're going for." I felt something crack inside my chest, not my heart, that had already broken when Jessica took her last breath. This was something else, something deeper. "Frank, please," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I just buried my wife today. This is my home." "Was your home," Olivia corrected. "It's mine now." The girl saying these words couldn't be my daughter. The Olivia I raised would never be this cruel, this calculating. But looking at her now, seeing how she stood behind Frank like he was her shield, I realized I might not know her at all anymore. "I need some time to process this," I said, reaching for Jessica's glasses in my pocket. They were real, solid, the only thing in this room that made sense. That's when Frank's face twisted into something ugly. "No, you don't get time. You get out. Now." "Frank," I warned, standing up. At 65, I wasn't the strong man I used to be, but I wasn't going to be intimidated in my own home. "What? You going to hit me, old man?" Frank stepped closer, his breath reeking of the whiskey he'd been drinking since breakfast. "You going to show everyone what a violent piece of trash you really are?" "Nobody's hitting anybody," I said firmly, "but this is still my house until—" The punch came out of nowhere. Frank's fist connected with my jaw, sending me stumbling backward into Jessica's china cabinet. The impact sent her collection of blue willow plates crashing to the floor, the sound echoing through the house like breaking hearts. "Now that we're rich, get out of our lives, you old piece of garbage," Frank screamed, his spit flying. "You're nothing but dead weight. A pathetic old man who couldn't even keep his wife alive." I lay there among the broken pieces of Jessica's dishes, tasting blood in my mouth, watching my daughter do absolutely nothing. She just stood there, watching her husband attack her father on the day of her mother's funeral. "Olivia," I whispered, looking up at her. "Please." She looked away. Frank grabbed me by the shirt and hauled me to my feet. Get your stuff and get out. You've got 1 hour. I touched my jaw, feeling it starting to swell. An hour to pack 37 years? Pack whatever fits in a suitcase, Frank said. Everything else belongs to us now. I looked around the living room, Jessica's books on the shelves, our wedding photos on the mantelpiece, the couch where we'd watched Olivia take her first steps, the corner where we'd put up Christmas trees every year since 1987. Just like that? I asked. Just like that, Olivia said, finally speaking. Her voice was barely above a whisper, but it might as well have been a shout. I nodded slowly, then went upstairs to what had been our bedroom. Jessica's side of the bed was still unmade from her last morning. I sat down on it and pulled out my phone. An hour later, I stood in the driveway with a single suitcase and a small box of photos. Frank had changed the locks while I packed. I could see him through the window, already on the phone with someone, probably planning whatever rich people do with their newfound wealth. Olivia stood in the doorway, her face pale but determined. Dad, you'll be better off this way. You can start fresh. I looked at her one last time, this stranger wearing my daughter's face. Your mother would be ashamed of you, I said quietly. For just a moment I saw the real Olivia flicker across her features, pain, doubt, regret. But then Frank appeared behind her, his hand possessive on her shoulder, and the mask slipped back into place. I got into my old pickup truck and drove away from the life Jessica and I had built together. In the rearview mirror, I watched Frank wrap his arms around Olivia, both of them silhouetted in the doorway of what used to be my home. They thought they'd won. They thought they were rich. They had no idea what was coming. I spent my first night as a homeless man in a Motel 6 off Highway 89, staring at water stains on the ceiling and listening to trucks rumble past. My jaw throbbed where Frank had hit me, and every time I moved, my ribs reminded me of my collision with Jessica's china cabinet. But the physical pain was nothing compared to the image burned into my mind. Olivia standing there, watching her husband throw punches at her father, and doing nothing. I'd raised that girl, taught her to ride a bike, walked her down the aisle just 3 years ago when she married Frank, against my better judgment, and this was how it ended. At 7 in the morning, I called Harold Martinez, the lawyer who'd handled Jessica's affairs for the past decade. Harold had been Jessica's friend since college, and he was one of the few people who truly understood how private she was about her family's money. John, Harold's voice was warm but surprised. I wasn't expecting to hear from you so soon. How are you holding up? I touched my swollen jaw. I've been better. Harold, I need to ask you something about Jessica's will. There was a pause. What kind of something? Frank and Olivia seem to think there's a $120 million inheritance. They threw me out of the house yesterday. The silence on the other end of the line stretched so long I thought the call had dropped. Then Harold cleared his throat. John, I think you need to come to my office. Right now. An hour later, I sat across from Harold's mahogany desk, watching him flip through a thick file with Jessica's name on it. His expression grew more troubled with each page. John, did Jessica ever talk to you about her father's estate? The oil investments? She mentioned it once or twice over the years, I said. Said she didn't want anything to do with that money. Too complicated, she said. Harold nodded grimly. That's because it was complicated. Very complicated. He pulled out a document and slid it across the desk. This is Jessica's actual will, the one I filed with the court yesterday morning. I picked up the papers, my hands shaking slightly. The legal language was dense, but one thing became clear as I read. Jessica hadn't left everything to Olivia. I don't understand, I said. What about the inheritance? The $120 million. Harold leaned back in his chair, looking older than his 60 years. John, there is a $120 million trust. Jessica's father set it up decades ago, but there's something Frank and Olivia don't know. He pulled out another document, this one even thicker. Jessica's father was a smart man, but he was also paranoid about gold diggers and fortune hunters. When he set up this trust, he included some very specific conditions. What kind of conditions? The money can only be accessed by Jessica's direct descendants, but only after certain requirements are met. And there's one big catch. Harold's expression was grave. The trust names you, John, as the primary beneficiary until your death. Olivia only inherits if you die of natural causes. The words hit me like a physical blow. What does that mean? It means Jessica left you everything. The house, her personal assets, and control of the trust. Olivia gets a small allowance, $50,000 for basic living expenses. But the real money stays locked up until you pass away naturally. I sat there trying to process what Harold was telling me. So they threw me out for nothing? Worse than nothing, Harold said grimly. If anything happens to you that isn't clearly natural causes, the entire trust goes to charity. Jessica's father was terrified that someone might try to murder his descendants for the money, so he built in protections. I thought about Frank's rage, his desperation, the way he'd counted money that wasn't even his. Does Frank know any of this? I doubt it. The law firm that contacted them yesterday only had partial information. They know about the trust, but they don't know about the conditions. I was planning to explain everything in a meeting next week. Harold stood up and walked to his window overlooking downtown. John, there's something else. Something I probably should have told you years ago. My stomach tightened. What? Jessica knew, he said quietly. She knew Frank was bad news from the beginning. She hired a private investigator before the wedding. The room seemed to tilt. She what? Harold returned to his desk and pulled out a manila folder. Frank has a history. 2 previous marriages, both ending in suspicious accidents. The first wife died in a fall down the stairs. The second one drowned in their pool. Both times, Frank inherited everything. I stared at the folder, afraid to touch it. Are you telling me my daughter married a killer? I'm telling you Jessica was worried enough to put safeguards in place. She restructured her entire estate after Olivia announced the engagement. I opened the folder with trembling hands. Police reports, insurance claims, newspaper clippings. Frank's first wife, Sarah, 26 years old. His second wife, Rebecca, 31. Both young, both wealthy, both dead within 2 years of marriage. Why didn't Jessica tell me? I whispered. She tried to tell Olivia, Harold said, but you know how that went. Olivia accused her of being jealous and controlling. They barely spoke for the last 6 months of Jessica's life. I remembered the tension between Jessica and Olivia, the way conversations would stop when I entered a room. I'd thought it was normal mother-daughter conflict, wedding stress. So what happens now? I asked. Harold sat down again, his expression serious. Now, you have some decisions to make. Legally, that house belongs to you. Frank and Olivia are trespassing. You could have them arrested. And the money? You control it all. Jessica left you detailed instructions about how she wanted it handled. But ultimately, it's your choice. You could cut Olivia off completely if you wanted to. I thought about my daughter standing in the doorway while Frank changed the locks, the way she looked through me like I was already dead. There's one more thing, Harold said, pulling out a sealed envelope. Jessica left this for you. She said to give it to you only if Frank showed his true colors. My name was written on the envelope in Jessica's careful handwriting. I broke the seal with shaking fingers and unfolded a single sheet of paper. My dearest John, the letter began. If you're reading this, then Frank has done exactly what I feared he would do. I'm sorry I couldn't protect you from this pain, but I needed you to see Olivia's choice with your own eyes. I had to stop reading for a moment, overwhelmed by seeing Jessica's words, hearing her voice in my head. I know this hurts, the letter continued. I know you want to forgive her, to make excuses for her behavior. That's who you are. The man who taught our daughter that family means everything, but some lessons can only be learned the hard way. The letter went on for another page, detailing Jessica's fears about Frank, her hopes for Olivia, and her instructions for how to handle the inheritance. At the bottom, in her familiar handwriting, was a single line that made my eyes water. Don't let them destroy you the way they destroyed us. I folded the letter carefully and put it in my pocket next to her reading glasses. What do you want to do, John? Harold asked gently. I thought about Olivia's cold voice telling me to find my own place. I thought about Frank's fist connecting with my jaw. I thought about Jessica, lying in her hospital bed those final days, whispering that she was worried about Olivia but couldn't make her listen. I want to wait, I said finally. Let them think they're rich for a while. Let them show their true colors. Harold nodded. And then? I touched the letter in my pocket, feeling Jessica's presence like a warm hand on my shoulder. Then we'll see what kind of people they really are. Outside Harold's office, I sat in my truck for a long time, watching people hurry past on the sidewalk. Normal people going about their normal lives, unaware that mine had just been turned completely upside down. Frank thought he'd won. He thought he'd claimed his prize and eliminated the obstacle. He had no idea the game had just begun. For the next 3 weeks, I became invisible. I rented a small apartment across town and took a part-time job at the hardware store where I'd been shopping for 30 years. The owner, Bill Thompson, didn't ask questions when I showed up looking for work. He just handed me an apron and put me to work organizing inventory. It was honest work, and it kept my hands busy while my mind planned. Every evening, I'd drive past what used to be my home. Frank had wasted no time making changes. A brand new Porsche sat in the driveway next to Olivia's Honda. The front yard, which Jessica had lovingly maintained for decades, was torn up for some kind of landscaping project. Through the windows, I could see new furniture being delivered almost daily. The boy was spending money like water, just as Jessica had predicted he would. I started keeping a notebook, documenting everything I observed. Frank's spending patterns, his behavior, the way he treated Olivia when he thought no one was watching. Harold had given me the contact information for the private investigator Jessica had used, and I decided it was time to make that call. Detective Sarah Chen met me at a diner downtown on a Thursday morning. She was younger than I'd expected, maybe 40, with sharp eyes that seemed to see everything at once. "Mr. Harrison," she said, sliding into the booth across from me. "Harold Martinez said you wanted to discuss your son-in-law." I pushed the folder Harold had given me across the table. "I want to know everything about Frank Caldwell, everything Jessica found, and everything she didn't." Sarah flipped through the police reports, her expression growing darker with each page. "Your wife was thorough and smart to be worried." She looked up at me. "What exactly are you hoping to accomplish here?" "I want to protect my daughter," I said. "Even if she doesn't want to be protected?" Sarah nodded slowly. "I'll need some time to update this investigation. Frank's been busy since your wife passed." "What do you mean?" She pulled out her own notebook. "He's been making inquiries about life insurance policies, asking questions about inheritance law. He even met with a couple of unsavory characters downtown last week." My blood ran cold. "What kind of unsavory characters?" "The kind that help people with problems they can't solve legally." Sarah said carefully, "Mr. Harrison, I think your daughter might be in more danger than either of you realizes." That evening I drove past the house again. This time I parked across the street and watched. Through the kitchen window, I could see Frank and Olivia having what looked like an argument. Frank was gesticulating wildly, his face red with anger. Olivia sat at the table with her head in her hands. My paternal instinct screamed at me to march up to that door and demand to know what was wrong. But Jessica's letter in my pocket reminded me to be patient, to wait, to let Frank reveal himself. Around 9 o'clock, Frank stormed out of the house and drove away in his Porsche. 10 minutes later, Olivia emerged and sat on the front porch steps, her shoulders shaking. Even from across the street, I could tell she was crying. It took every ounce of willpower I had not to go to her. The next morning, Sarah called with an update. "Your son-in-law met with a man named Tommy Ricci last night. Ricci's got a record for assault, extortion, and a few other things. They met at a bar downtown and talked for about an hour." "About what?" I couldn't get close enough to hear everything, but I caught a few words. "Your name came up. So did the word accident." I gripped the phone tighter. "Are you saying what I think you're saying?" "I'm saying you need to be very careful, Mr. Harrison, and maybe it's time to involve the police." But I wasn't ready for that yet. Frank was revealing himself exactly as Jessica had predicted, but Olivia was still defending him, still choosing him over her own father. Until she saw his true nature with her own eyes, any intervention from me would just look like jealous meddling. That weekend, I decided to take a more direct approach to observation. I drove to the mall where Olivia worked as a nurse practitioner at the clinic. I waited in the parking lot until her shift ended, then followed her to the grocery store. She looked tired, more tired than any 30-year-old should look. Her scrubs hung loose on her frame, like she'd lost weight. When she reached for items on the high shelves, I noticed her wince, favoring her left side. At the checkout line, I watched her count bills carefully, putting back a package of the good coffee she used to love. The woman buying groceries with such careful frugality was supposed to be worth $120 million. Something wasn't adding up. I followed her home from a distance and watched her carry the groceries inside alone. Frank's Porsche wasn't in the driveway. Through the kitchen window, I saw her start dinner preparations, moving slowly like everything hurt. The next morning, I called Harold. "I need you to check something for me. Has Frank tried to access any of the trust money yet?" "As a matter of fact, yes," Harold said. "He's been calling my office every day for the past 2 weeks, getting increasingly aggressive about when the money will be available." "What are you telling him?" "The truth, that there are legal procedures that have to be followed. Probate court, tax assessments, that sort of thing. I'm buying us time, but he's getting impatient." "Good, let him get impatient. Impatient people make mistakes." That evening, I made a decision that would have horrified Jessica. I drove to my old house and parked right in the driveway. If Frank wanted to confront me, let him confront me. I didn't have to wait long. The front door slammed open and Frank stormed out, his face twisted with rage. "What the hell are you doing here?" he shouted, approaching my truck. I rolled down the window and looked at him calmly, visiting my daughter. "This isn't your house anymore, old man. Get lost before I call the cops." "Go ahead and call them," I said. "I'd love to explain to them how you've been spending money that doesn't belong to you." Frank's face went pale, then red again. "What are you talking about?" "The Porsche, the new furniture, the landscaping project. Where exactly do you think that money is coming from?" Frank grabbed the edge of my truck window, his knuckles white. "That's none of your business." "Actually, it is my business, more than you know." Before Frank could respond, Olivia appeared in the doorway. She looked between her husband and her father, confusion and fear warring on her face. "Dad, what are you doing here?" I looked at my daughter, really looked at her. The weight loss was more obvious up close. So was the fading bruise on her upper arm, partially hidden by her long sleeves. "I came to check on you, sweetheart. You don't look well." Frank stepped between us, blocking my view of Olivia. "She's fine. We're fine. We'd be better if you'd stop harassing us." "I'm not harassing anyone. I'm concerned about my daughter." "Your daughter doesn't want to see you," Frank snarled. "Tell him, Olivia." I watched Olivia's face carefully. For a moment, she looked like she wanted to say something. Her lips parted, and I saw a flicker of the little girl who used to tell me everything. But then Frank's hand landed on her shoulder, his grip clearly firm, and the moment passed. "Dad, you should go," she said quietly. I nodded, but I didn't start the truck yet. "Olivia, if you ever need anything at all, you know how to reach me." Frank's grip on her shoulder tightened. "She won't need anything from you." As I drove away, I saw Frank in my rearview mirror, already pulling out his phone, probably calling his new friend Tommy Ricci to complain about my unexpected visit. Let him call, let him get desperate. Let him make the kind of mistake that would finally open Olivia's eyes to what she'd married. That night I sat in my small apartment with Jessica's reading glasses in one hand and her letter in the other. "I'm trying to be patient," I whispered to her memory, "but she's hurting, and I can see it." The next morning, Sarah Chen called with news that changed everything. "Mr. Harrison, you need to hear this. I managed to get a recording of Frank's conversation with Tommy Ricci last night." "What did they say?" "Frank wants you dead. He's offering Ricci $50,000 to make it look like an accident. A mugging gone wrong, maybe. Or a hit and run." My hands went numb. "When?" "Soon. Ricci told him it would take a few days to set up, but Frank is pushing for this weekend." I closed my eyes, thinking of Olivia's bruised arm, her careful grocery shopping, the way she'd winced when she moved. Frank wasn't just planning to kill me for money. He was already hurting her, and it would only get worse once he thought he'd eliminated the only person who might protect her. "Sarah, I need you to keep recording everything, every conversation, every meeting. I want evidence of all of it." "Mr. Harrison, maybe it's time to involve the police." "Not yet, but soon, very soon." After I hung up, I called Harold. "It's time," I said simply. "Frank just crossed a line he can't uncross." "What do you need me to do?" "Schedule that meeting you mentioned. The one where you explain the real terms of Jessica's will. Make it for Monday morning." "And Frank?" I thought about my daughter, trapped in a house with a man who'd killed before and was planning to kill again. A man who was already hurting her while spending money that would never be his. Frank's about to learn that some games have rules he never knew existed. The weekend crawled by like a wounded animal. Every time I left my apartment, I half expected Tommy Ricci to step out of the shadows. Sarah Chen had arranged for unmarked police surveillance, but I still jumped at every unexpected sound. On Sunday evening, Frank made his move, but not the one I'd been expecting. I was getting ready for bed when my phone rang. Olivia's number flashed on the screen, and my heart stopped. She never called me anymore. "Dad?" Her voice was barely above a whisper, thick with tears. "Olivia, what's wrong?" "I'm at the hospital," she said, and I could hear the tremor in her voice. "I had an accident." I was already reaching for my keys. "What kind of accident?" "Where are you?" "Memorial General. Emergency room." "Dad, I'm scared." "I'm on my way." The drive to the hospital took 12 minutes that felt like 12 hours. I burst through the emergency room doors and found Olivia sitting in a wheelchair near the nurse's station, her left arm in a sling, her face pale and drawn. "Sweetheart," I said, kneeling beside her chair. "What happened?" She looked around nervously before answering. "I fell down the stairs. Frank said I was being clumsy, not watching where I was going." I examined her injuries with the eye of someone who'd raised an active child. A dislocated shoulder, bruising on her ribs, a cut on her forehead that had required stitches. None of it looked like a simple fall. "Where's Frank now?" I asked. "He went home. Said he'd pick me up tomorrow when I was ready to be discharged. Something cold settled in my stomach. He left you here alone? Olivia nodded, fresh tears spilling down her cheeks. Dad, I think I made a mistake. A really big mistake. Before I could respond, a doctor approached us. Dr. Sarah Martinez, according to her name tag, looked to be about Olivia's age with kind eyes and a concerned expression. Mrs. Caldwell, I have your discharge papers ready, but I need to ask you a few questions first. Dr. Martinez glanced at me. Are you family? I'm her father, I said. Good, Mrs. Caldwell. The pattern of your injuries is concerning. The bruising on your ribs shows evidence of impact from a blunt object, not a fall, and your shoulder was dislocated by force applied from behind. I felt my hands clench into fists. What are you saying, doctor? I'm saying these injuries are consistent with domestic violence, not an accidental fall. Olivia shrank into herself. That's not what happened. I fell. Frank would never hurt me. Doctor. Martinez knelt down to Olivia's eye level. Mrs. Caldwell, I've been an emergency room physician for 8 years. I know what these injuries look like. You're safe here. If someone is hurting you, we can help. Nobody's hurting me, Olivia insisted, but her voice lacked conviction. I touched her uninjured hand gently. Olivia, you can tell me the truth. Whatever happened, whatever you've been through, I'm here. She looked up at me with the same eyes she'd had as a child when she'd broken something and was afraid to confess. Dad, I think Frank has been lying to me about a lot of things. Dr. Martinez excused herself to give us privacy. I pulled up a chair next to Olivia's wheelchair. What kind of things? The money, she said quietly. He keeps saying it's tied up in legal procedures, but it's been weeks, and he's been spending so much. Credit cards, loans, all in my name, because he says the inheritance makes me a better risk. My heart sank. Frank had been setting her up to take the fall for his spending spree. Olivia, what really happened tonight? She was quiet for so long, I thought she wouldn't answer. Then the words came tumbling out. He was drunk. Again, he'd been drinking all day and going through the mail, looking for anything from lawyers or banks. When there was nothing, he started screaming about how you must be blocking the inheritance somehow. I stayed silent, letting her talk. I tried to calm him down, told him these things take time. That's when he pushed me, said I was taking your side, said I was ungrateful after everything he'd done for me. Her voice broke. I hit the stairs so hard I thought I was going to black out. And then he stood over me and said if I told anyone what really happened, he'd make sure I lost everything. The house, the money, everything. I thought about Frank's conversation with Tommy Ricci about his plans to have me killed. He was accelerating his timeline, getting desperate. Olivia, there's something you need to know about Frank, about his past. I told her about Jessica's investigation, about Frank's previous wives, about everything Harold had shared with me. With each revelation, Olivia's face grew paler. You're saying he killed his other wives? I'm saying 2 young women died under suspicious circumstances, and Frank inherited everything both times. Olivia stared at her hands. Mom tried to tell me something like this before the wedding. I thought she was just being controlling, trying to break us up because she didn't like him. Your mother loved you more than her own life, I said softly. She was trying to protect you. And I chose him over her, over both of you. Fresh tears started flowing. Dad, I said such horrible things to you. I let him throw you out of your own house. How can you even look at me? I reached over and took her uninjured hand in both of mine. Because you're my daughter, because I love you, because that's what family does. She squeezed my hand. What do I do now? How do I get out of this? Before I could answer, my phone buzzed with a text from Sarah Chen. Frank just met with Ricci again. Tomorrow night is the plan. Be ready. I looked at my broken daughter, sitting in a hospital wheelchair because her husband had thrown her down the stairs, and I made a decision. Olivia, I need you to trust me. Can you do that? She nodded. I want you to go home with Frank tomorrow like nothing happened, but I need you to be very careful around him. Can you do that? Dad, what are you planning? I'm planning to make sure you're safe. And I'm planning to make sure Frank gets exactly what he deserves. The next morning, Harold Martinez called an emergency meeting at his law office. Frank arrived looking smug and confident, probably thinking this was finally the meeting where he'd get access to the trust fund. Olivia came with him, her arm still in a sling, moving carefully. Thank you both for coming, Harold said, settling behind his desk with a thick folder. We need to discuss some important details about Jessica's estate. Frank leaned forward eagerly. It's about time. When can we access the funds? Harold opened the folder deliberately. Mr. Caldwell, there seems to have been some confusion about the terms of Jessica's will. What kind of confusion? The inheritance you've been expecting doesn't exist, not in the way you think. Frank's face went through several emotions at once. Confusion, anger, and something that looked like panic. What are you talking about? The trust fund. The $120 million. The trust fund exists, Harold said calmly. But you and Olivia aren't the beneficiaries. I watched Frank's face as Harold explained the real terms of Jessica's will, how I controlled everything, how Olivia would only inherit if I died of natural causes, how any suspicious death would result in everything going to charity. By the time Harold finished, Frank looked like he was going to be sick. This is impossible, Frank sputtered. The other lawyer said. The other lawyers had incomplete information, Harold said. I'm Jessica's primary attorney. These are the real terms. Frank turned to look at me, and I saw something dangerous flicker in his eyes. You planned this. You and that dead wife of yours planned this whole thing. Jessica was protecting her daughter, I said calmly, from men exactly like you. Frank shot to his feet, his chair scraping against the floor. This is fraud. You can't cut us out like this. Actually, I can, I said, standing as well, because Jessica left me everything, including the house you've been living in. The house is mine. No, Frank, it's mine, and you're trespassing. For a moment, I thought Frank might take a swing at me right there in Harold's office. His fists were clenched, his breathing heavy. But then he seemed to remember where he was. Come on, Olivia, he said through gritted teeth. We're leaving. Olivia looked between her husband and her father, and I held my breath. This was the moment. This was her choice. No, she said quietly. I'm staying. Frank whirled around. What did you say? I said I'm staying. With my father. Frank's mask finally slipped completely. You ungrateful bitch. After everything I've done for you, this is how you repay me? Everything you've done for me? Olivia's voice was getting stronger. You mean like pushing me down the stairs? Like spending money we don't have? Like lying to me about everything? Frank stepped toward her and I moved to block his path. That's close enough. Get out of my way, old man. My wife and I are leaving. No, I said firmly. You're leaving. Alone. Frank looked around the room, realizing that he'd lost everything in the span of 20 minutes. The money he'd never actually had. The wife who'd finally seen his true nature. The house that had never been his. This isn't over, he said, pointing at me. You have no idea who you're messing with. Actually, I do, I said. I know exactly who you are, Frank. The question is, do you know who I am? Frank stormed out of Harold's office, slamming the door so hard the windows rattled. Through the glass, I watched him pace in the parking lot, pulling out his phone, probably calling Tommy Ricci to move up the timeline even further. That was fine. Sarah Chen and her team were ready, and Frank had just made the biggest mistake of his life. He'd shown his true colors in front of witnesses. That evening, I moved Olivia into a hotel under an assumed name while Sarah Chen's surveillance team prepared for Frank's next move. We didn't have to wait long. At 8:47 p.m., Frank's Porsche pulled into the parking lot of Murphy's Bar, the same dive where he'd been meeting Tommy Ricci. Sarah's voice crackled through my earpiece from the surveillance van. Subject is inside. Ricci just arrived. They're moving to a back booth. I sat in my truck across the street, watching through the grimy windows of the bar. My hands were steady, but my heart was racing. After weeks of watching Frank destroy my daughter's life, tonight it would finally end. Audio is coming through clear, Sarah reported. Frank's talking about moving up the timeline. He wants it done tonight. Through my earpiece, I could hear Frank's agitated voice. The old bastard knows something. We can't wait anymore. I need this done tonight, and I need it to look convincing. Tommy Ricci's gravelly response was barely audible. Tonight's gonna cost you extra. Double what we agreed. Fine, whatever. Just make it look like a robbery gone wrong. Beat him up, take his wallet, make sure he doesn't get up. I closed my eyes, thinking about Jessica's letter in my pocket. She'd known this day would come. She'd tried to prepare me for it. He's leaving, Sarah said. Ricci's staying behind to make some calls. Frank emerged from the bar, stumbling slightly as he headed to his car. Even from across the street, I could see the rage radiating from him. He sat in his Porsche for several minutes, probably working up the courage for what came next. My phone rang. Frank's number. Answer it, Sarah instructed. Keep him talking. I picked up on the third ring. Hello, Frank. John. His voice was slurred with alcohol and fury. We need to talk. I'm listening. Not over the phone. Meet me at the house, our house. There are things that need to be settled. I looked toward the surveillance van, knowing Sarah was recording every word. What kind of things? You know what kind. You and that manipulative dead wife of yours think you're so smart, but you made one mistake. What's that? You left Olivia alone with me for 3 years. You have no idea what I know about her, what I could tell people. My blood went cold. What are you talking about? Frank's laugh was ugly and sharp. Your precious daughter isn't the angel you think she is. Meet me at the house in 1 hour, or I start making phone calls. To her work, to the medical board, to anyone who will listen. The line went dead. Sarah's voice came through my earpiece immediately. It's a trap, obviously. Ricci's probably already heading to your apartment or the hotel. No, I said, starting my truck. He's going to the house. Frank's too arrogant to let someone else handle this. He wants to do it himself. John, don't. We'll get him another way. But I was already driving. Sarah, make sure your people are ready. And if something happens to me, make sure Olivia knows the truth about everything. The drive to my old house took 15 minutes. Frank's Porsche was already in the driveway, and every light in the house was on. As I approached the front door, I could see him pacing in the living room, a bottle of whiskey in his hand. I didn't knock. The door was unlocked, which told me everything I needed to know about Frank's state of mind. "Frank!" I called out as I stepped inside. He appeared in the doorway between the living room and kitchen, swaying slightly. The bottle in his hand was half empty, and his eyes had the wild look of a man who'd lost everything and had nothing left to lose. "There he is," Frank said, raising the bottle in a mock toast. "The great John Harrison, the man who destroyed my life." I looked around the room that had once been my sanctuary with Jessica. Frank had redecorated it completely, stripping away every trace of the life we'd built together. The walls where our family photos had hung were now covered with expensive art I didn't recognize. The furniture was all wrong, too modern, too cold. "You destroyed your own life, Frank. I just stopped paying for it." Frank took a long pull from the whiskey bottle. "You think you're so clever. You and Jessica plotting against me from beyond the grave." Jessica was protecting her daughter, something you clearly never understood how to do. "Protecting her?" Frank's voice rose to a shout. "From what? From me? I gave Olivia everything. A house, money, status. I made her somebody. I thought about Olivia sitting in that hospital wheelchair, her arm in a sling, too afraid to tell the truth about how she'd been hurt. You gave her bruises. You gave her fear. You made her afraid to be herself." Frank hurled the whiskey bottle at the wall behind me. It shattered against the spot where Jessica's favorite painting used to hang, leaving a dark stain on the white paint. "You don't know anything about my marriage. I know you pushed my daughter down a flight of stairs. She fell. She's clumsy, just like her mother was." The casual way he mentioned Jessica's death made something snap inside me. "Don't you dare talk about my wife." "Your wife?" Frank laughed bitterly. "Your wife was a manipulative bitch who poisoned Olivia against me from day one. She never gave me a chance." I took a step toward him, my hands clenched into fists. "Jessica saw exactly what you were, a parasite, a killer." "Killer?" Frank's expression shifted, becoming more alert despite the alcohol. "What did you call me?" "I know about Sarah and Rebecca, Frank. I know what you did to your other wives." For a moment, Frank just stared at me. Then his face split into a grin that chilled me to the bone. "Prove it," he said. "I don't have to prove anything. The police already have all the evidence they need." Frank's grin faltered. "What police?" "The ones who've been watching you for weeks. The ones who recorded your conversation with Tommy Ricci tonight. The ones who know you hired him to kill me." Frank went very still. "You're lying." "Am I?" "Check your phone, Frank. See if Tommy's answering his calls." Frank fumbled for his phone with shaking hands. He dialed a number, waited, then tried again. And again. "He's not picking up because he's in custody," I said calmly, along with the recording equipment he was wearing tonight. Frank's face went white. "This is impossible." "You can't have planned all this." "I didn't plan it, Frank. You did. Every threat, every conversation, every stupid decision. Jessica warned me you'd self-destruct if we gave you enough rope." Frank looked around the room like a trapped animal. "Olivia will never believe you. She loves me. Olivia's safe. She's somewhere you'll never find her. And she knows the truth about everything. About your other wives. About the money. About what you really are." That's when Frank finally snapped. He rushed at me, his hands reaching for my throat. Despite being 20 years younger, the alcohol had slowed him down. I sidestepped his charge and let his momentum carry him into the coffee table. He crashed into it hard, sending magazines and decorative objects flying. When he struggled to his feet, there was blood running from a cut on his forehead. "You ruined everything," he screamed. "Everything?" He came at me again, this time with a piece of broken glass from the whiskey bottle. I grabbed a poker from the fireplace, the same fireplace where Jessica and I had spent countless winter evenings together. "Frank, stop. It's over." "It's not over until you're dead." He lunged with the glass shard, aiming for my neck. I brought the poker up to block him, catching his wrist. The glass flew out of his hand and skittered across the hardwood floor. Frank stumbled backward, cradling his injured wrist. "You have no idea what you've done, what this means." "I know exactly what it means. It means my daughter is free." That's when I heard the sirens approaching. Frank heard them too, his head snapping toward the windows as red and blue lights began flashing outside. "No," he whispered. "No, no, no." The front door burst open, and Detective Sarah Chen entered with 3 uniformed officers behind her. "Frank Caldwell," she announced. "You're under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder, assault, and fraud." Frank looked at me one last time, his face a mask of pure hatred. "This isn't over, John. Even if I go to prison, this isn't over." "Yes, it is," I said quietly. "For you, it's over." As they led Frank away in handcuffs, he was still screaming threats and accusations. The neighbors had come out of their houses to watch the spectacle. Mrs. Patterson from next door caught my eye and nodded approvingly. After the police cars drove away, I stood alone in the house that had once been my home. Frank's expensive furniture and artwork suddenly looked cheap and garish without him there to defend them. Sarah Chen approached me, closing her notebook. "We got everything we need. The recording of his confession tonight, plus all the evidence from his conversations with Ricci. He's going away for a long time." I nodded, feeling suddenly exhausted. "What about Olivia? Is she safe?" "She's safe, and she's asking for you." I looked around the room one more time, seeing traces of Jessica in the bones of the house that no amount of redecorating could erase, the way the evening light slanted through the western windows, the corner where our Christmas tree had stood every December for 37 years. "Detective Chen," I said, "I want to make sure Frank never gets the chance to hurt another woman." "Don't worry, Mr. Harrison. With his record and tonight's evidence, he'll be lucky to see the outside of a prison cell before he's 70. As I walked out of the house, I pulled Jessica's reading glasses from my pocket and held them up to catch the last rays of sunlight coming through the front windows. "It's finished," I whispered to her memory. "Our girl is safe." The glasses seemed to sparkle in the light, and for just a moment, I could almost feel Jessica's hand on my shoulder, telling me I'd done well. Frank was wrong about one thing. It was over. Completely and finally over. 3 months later, I stood in the kitchen of my old house, watching Olivia make coffee in the same spot where Jessica used to start every morning. The bruises had healed, her shoulder had mended, and slowly, carefully, we were rebuilding what Frank had tried to destroy. The house felt different now, lighter somehow. Frank's gaudy additions had been removed or donated. Olivia had replanted Jessica's garden, bringing back the roses and daisies that her mother had loved. We'd even found most of Jessica's blue willow plates in storage, carefully packed away by Olivia after Frank had declared them old-fashioned. "Dad, there's something I need to ask you," Olivia said, handing me a steaming mug. "About Mom's will. You said she left specific instructions about the money. I'd been waiting for this conversation. Over the past months, as Olivia healed physically and emotionally, I'd watched her become someone new, someone stronger, someone ready to hear the truth about what Jessica had really left behind. Sit down, sweetheart. There's a lot you need to know." I went to the safe in my study and returned with a sealed envelope marked for Olivia when she's ready. Jessica's handwriting still as familiar as breathing. "Your mother wrote this before she died. She was very specific about when you should receive it." Olivia took the envelope with trembling hands. When I was ready for what? To understand why she did everything she did. Olivia opened the envelope carefully, as if it contained something fragile. Inside was a letter, along with several legal documents I'd never seen before. "My darling Olivia," the letter began, and I watched my daughter's eyes fill with tears at seeing her mother's words. "If you're reading this, then you've finally seen Frank for who he really is. I'm sorry you had to learn this lesson the hard way, but some truths can only be discovered through experience." Olivia paused, wiping her eyes. "Dad, did you know what this says?" "I know some of it. But Jessica kept some secrets even from me." She continued reading, her expression changing with each paragraph. "Mom says she never intended for me to be cut out of the inheritance. She says the will your lawyer read to Frank wasn't the real one. I felt my own surprise. What do you mean? Olivia held up one of the legal documents. This is the real will. Mom left everything to both of us equally, but she set up a test first. What kind of test? A test to see if I would choose family over money, if I would choose you over Frank when it really mattered. Olivia's voice broke. She knew Frank would show his true colors if he thought the money was out of reach. She was testing me to see if I would stand by you when everything fell apart. I sat down heavily, stunned by Jessica's elaborate plan. Even from beyond the grave, she'd been protecting our family. There's more, Olivia said, her voice stronger now. Mom established a foundation for women escaping abusive relationships. She wanted us to run it together, using the inheritance to help other families like ours. I thought about Jessica's careful planning, her quiet strength, the way she'd always put family first. Of course, she would want to help other women trapped in situations like Olivia's. She even picked out a name for it. Olivia continued, smiling through her tears. The Jessica Harrison Foundation for Family Healing. She kept her maiden name for the foundation. She said family names should mean something, that they should represent love and protection, not control and manipulation. I reached across the table and took Olivia's hand. What do you think? Are you ready to help other families? I think Mom was smarter than both of us ever realized, Olivia said, and I think she's been trying to bring us back together from the very beginning. The next week, we met with Harold Martinez to officially establish the foundation. As we signed the papers that would transfer the majority of Jessica's inheritance to the new organization, I felt her presence in the room with us. Your mother would be proud, Harold said, watching us work through the legal documents. She always said that money was only valuable if it could protect the people you love. She protected us even when we didn't know we needed protecting, Olivia said. I just wish I could tell her I'm sorry, for not listening, for choosing Frank over her. I looked at my daughter, who'd grown so much in these past months. Sweetheart, I think she knows. Later that afternoon, we drove to the cemetery where Jessica was buried. Olivia brought fresh daisies, Jessica's favorites, and I brought her reading glasses. I'd been carrying them in my pocket for months, unable to let them go. Mom, Olivia said, kneeling beside the headstone, I know you can't hear me, but I need to say this anyway. You were right about Frank. You were right about everything. I'm sorry I didn't trust you. She placed the daisies carefully at the base of the stone. Dad and I are going to run the foundation together. We're going to help other families stay together. And I promise, I'll never let anyone come between us again. I knelt beside her and placed Jessica's glasses next to the flowers. Thank you, I whispered, for protecting her even when she didn't want to be protected, for making sure we found our way back to each other. As we stood to leave, Olivia slipped her arm through mine. Dad, I have a question about something else Mom wrote in her letter. What's that? She said you were the strongest man she ever knew, that you taught her what real love looked like. What did she mean by that? I thought about Jessica's final months, when she was scared about Olivia's marriage but didn't know how to intervene without pushing her daughter further away. How she'd planned everything so carefully, trusting that love would eventually win out over manipulation. I think she meant that real love sometimes means letting people make their own mistakes, trusting that they'll find their way back to you when they're ready. Is that what you did? Let me make my own mistakes? I waited for you to come home, I said simply, because I knew you would. Your mother knew it too. 6 months later, the Jessica Harrison Foundation opened its doors in a renovated building downtown. Olivia had thrown herself into the work with the same determination she'd once used to defend Frank. She'd trained as a counselor, learned about domestic violence patterns, and developed programs to help women recognize the warning signs before it was too late. I handled the administrative side, using skills I'd developed during my years in construction management. It felt good to be building something positive again, something that would last. On our opening day, we served coffee and cookies to our first group of clients. Women of all ages, all backgrounds, all connected by the common thread of having loved someone who'd tried to control them. My husband convinced me that my family didn't care about me. One woman shared. He said if they really loved me, they would support my relationship with him, no matter what. I watched Olivia nod with understanding. That's called isolation, she said gently. It's one of the first tactics abusers use. They separate you from your support system so you become dependent on them. How do you know so much about this? The woman asked. Olivia looked across the room at me, and I nodded encouragingly. Because I lived it, she said. I married a man who tried to turn me against my own father, who convinced me that my family was the problem, not him. What made you realize the truth? My father never gave up on me, Olivia said, even when I said terrible things to him, even when I chose my husband over him. He waited for me to find my way back. After the session ended, Olivia and I cleaned up the coffee cups and folded the chairs. The work was simple but satisfying. Mom would have loved this, Olivia said, looking around at the bright, welcoming space we'd created. She did love this, I said. She planned all of it. That evening, we had dinner at the house, sitting at the same kitchen table where Frank had once counted money that didn't belong to him, but now it felt like home again. Olivia had moved back in after the foundation opened, and we'd fallen into comfortable routines that reminded me of the early days when she was young, and it was just the three of us. Dad, can I ask you something? Olivia said over dessert. Of course. Do you think Frank ever really loved me, or was it always about the money? I considered the question carefully. It was something I'd wondered about myself. I think Frank loved the idea of you, I said finally. Young, beautiful, from a good family, with prospects for inheritance. But love isn't about what someone can give you. It's about wanting the best for them, even when it doesn't benefit you. Like how you wanted me to be happy, even when I was choosing someone who was hurting me. Exactly like that. Olivia nodded, understanding. And like how Mom set up the foundation even though she knew she wouldn't be here to see it. She wanted to help other families even though it couldn't help ours. Your mother always thought about the bigger picture, about how our choices affect other people, not just ourselves. Later that night, I sat on the front porch where Jessica used to read her gardening magazines. Olivia joined me, bringing 2 cups of tea and a thick folder. What's that? I asked. Applications, she said. For women who want to use the foundation's services. We got 37 applications in our first week. 37 women who need help getting away from men like Frank. 37 women who will get the support I wish I'd had, Olivia corrected. Thanks to Mom's planning and your patience. I looked out at Jessica's garden, blooming again after months of neglect. Tomorrow there would be more women to help, more families to heal, more work to do. But tonight, sitting here with my daughter, I felt the peace that comes from knowing you've honored the people you love. Dad, Olivia said softly, thank you for not giving up on me, even when I gave up on myself. I reached over and squeezed her hand. That's what family does, sweetheart. We hold on to each other, especially when it's hard. Mom knew that, didn't she? When she was planning all of this, I smiled, thinking of Jessica's letter, her careful preparations, her absolute faith that love would win in the end. Your mother knew that the strongest force in the world isn't money or power or manipulation. It's family that refuses to let go. Above us, the stars came out one by one, and for the first time since Jessica's death, the world felt exactly as it should be. Now I'm curious about you who listened to my story. What would you do if you were in my place? Have you ever been through something similar? Comment below, and meanwhile, I'm leaving on the final screen 2 other stories that are channel favorites, and they will definitely surprise you. Thank you for watching. Until here.